Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today as we talk about the next chapter in the federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates. So we've had a few webinars on this topic. Joining me today is my guest, Mary Simmons. We're going to talk about a new guide that we put out, an ebook that really unpacks the details of the mandate and some guidance. We're going to talk about the legal challenges and legal updates. And then a whole bunch of really specific state issues. That what you're going to learn today is there's a ton of uncertainty, and so we want to talk about what's going on, what we may not know about federal implementation guidelines yet. There's a ton of stuff we do know about states. So I can think of no person more expert to help us unpack this topic than Mary Simmons. If you haven't met her before on these calls, Mary Simmons, she's our Vice President of HR Consulting. For the past 8 years, she's been an adjunct professor at the New York Institute of Technology. Prior to SURE, Mary led the HR consulting practice for 11 years at a New York-based law firm, Portney, Messenger, and Pearl and Associates. She's also held very prestigious roles at Lee Hecht Harrison and spent 16 years in HR at the Bank of New York. So not only highly credentialed and really knows what the heck she's talking about, a great human being. And thanks for joining me today, Mary.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Okay, so a little context. I think a lot of our audience joins every week as we kind of put this educational content out here. But let's maybe just back up. But I don't think we need to unpack all of what the mandate was. But Mary, could you just, kind of 30 seconds or less for those who are kind of just getting up to speed on what this mandate is? Just talk about what the administration's guidance. I shouldn't say guidance. It was an executive order, right? That they asked OSHA to provide the rules for implementation and enforcement on. So can you just kind of give everybody a high-level reminder of what this mandate is?
Sure. So and you have some good information up here, but for our employers on the call, the main things that you need to know for this mandate is that it's for employers of 100 or more employees, and it will mandate that you either have the vaccine as a mandate for your employees or you allow for testing option. And with that testing option may come, the requirement for masking as well. And that sounds really simple, Mike, but what the employers need to understand, if this comes to fruition, which is, right now under discussion, is that there's a lot of moving parts to make all of that happen. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, of course.
Yeah, very good. So, before we get deeper, and I would encourage you, if you haven't already done it, you can kind of follow along. We just published a new guide on this topic. This is maybe one of the most comprehensive pieces of content we've ever put together. You can see by the title, we unpack the mandates, the COVID-19 vaccine mandates, 50 plus questions about implementation, compliance, testing, masks, in the legal issues. So we're going to talk really on the next slide about some of the uncertainty around this. I think regardless of where the law is at, I think this stands as a very comprehensive guide for employers to how they should be thinking about the elements of the mandate in the plans that they should be putting in place, regardless of what the outcome in the courts are. So highly encourage you, suresoftware.com/guide to federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates. A ton of great resources there for you. So, Mary, let's kind of jump into the chaos, if you will. So, I'll take the easy part, the left side. You can kind of take the hard part, the right side. We'll talk about the uncertainty. So, September 9th, President Biden stands and delivers a talk announcing the 6-point plan to address coronavirus, right? Embedded in that was the vaccine mandates and all that meant. All of us really waiting very anxiously for the OSHA guidance that was forthcoming, right? So this is an executive order But in the executive order, President Biden, said, hey, we're asking OSHA to be kind of the rule bearer here. And so talk about what the rules are, how it's implemented, and then what enforcement looks like. And so that took a couple months. It was on November 5th that all came out. And I think Mary and I did a webinar. We talked about that in detail, about that OSHA guidance in how employers should be thinking about implementing that. Well, it wasn't 24 hours before I think it was something like 11 different states' attorneys general filed lawsuits, ended up in the Fifth Circuit Court to basically say that the mandates overreached its constitutional authority. OSHA overreached its constitutional authority. In the Fifth Circuit Courts, quote unquote, stayed the order, meaning it didn't strike it down as unconstitutional, but basically paused its implementation, right?
Right.
Lots of legal action after the 6th, including going to the Sixth Circuit Court, where OSHA in the Biden administration has filed another lawsuit, basically asking to reenact, to stop the stay and put this in place. And so, as you and I have been talking about this and preparing for today's conversation, we really see this as three potential outcomes, right? Either the Biden administration is going to get their way, whether you love it or hate it. This isn't a political conversation. This is just what we think the reality of the possible outcomes are. Either it's going to fly as is, or it's everyone's going to have to comply to some modified version of the mandate, or the thing's going to get struck down as unconstitutional. Can you kind of just speak to these three outcomes? In I don't necessarily want to get into a probability game here. I know you're smart and talented, but there's no way any of us know for sure.
Yeah,
but
no.
put some context on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about complying as is. So I'm pretty sure that even though I can't tell the future, Mike, it's not going to remain as is, because one of the mandates was starting next week, and I really don't believe that this is going to get approved, and the December 5th date to start adhering to some of these mandates would start. So I really don't think it's going to stay as is. Now, even if some of those dates may, get changed, right, and pushed out, because this is still in the courts and it's still being settled what's going to happen, do I, if I was a betting lady, do I think it will be modified? I believe it will, right? Because it's in the court. So you've got two parties arguing over the, mandate. And, some of the things that the people that brought up the case were complaining about was, one of the things was they said, we really don't think that COVID is, as per OSHA requirements, an airborne danger, right? So they got to kind of figure that out before it's going to go forward. And there, of course, there's many things that they brought up to fight the mandate. But one of the other things that's interesting was they attacked the arbitrary number of 100 employees as a count for tripping the mandate. And that's really interesting, because that word arbitrary really sticks with judges when you're in a court of law, right? Because they never want anything to be arbitrary. So what the courts were saying is, hey, so what do you mean? If an employer only has 99 employees, they're safe. But if you have 100 employees, you're not safe, and you have to do this mandate. So that's, just two of the many things that are being challenged here. And, again, if I was a betting lady, I'd say to some degree, some of those modifications are definitely going to stick, because there's just so many of them. And the last one, that 100 count, is a pretty good argument that I think any litigator would, kind of scratch their head and go, that sounds that sounds like a good challenge. Again, I really don't know what's going to happen. And as far as it getting struck down, I don't see that. But again, it's anybody's bet whether it's 1, 2, or 3 here. And we really don't know. But one of the things that Mike and I want to, impress upon everybody on the call today is that don't bet on it being struck down. I would still take some action. And that's why we thought it was valuable to educate everybody on the call as to, listen, the federal mandate may be in a state of flux, but there's still local and state laws that are out there that we need to pay attention to, that we wanted to discuss with you guys today.
It's interesting is I'm listening to you talk, Mary, and it just kind of dawned on me this quote unquote arbitrary number of 100 employees. It's 10 employees. That's the line in the sand for when OSHA has regulatory authority on an enforcement of safe work environment, right? So that's interesting that that would be a potential new line in the sand. And honestly, I'm kind of with you. It seems to me you've got 2 camps here. And again, we are not taking political sides. We only care about providing the best information we can to help small businesses grow. The things are already shot down by the 5th Circuit. 6th Circuit kind of validated that decision. So it seems unlikely this is going to fly as is. There's too much. Maybe legal precedence is a strong way of saying it, but that seems unlikely. But I also can't imagine the administration kind of backing down when you think about what are the objectives. It's to they want to do whatever they can within the legal framework to increase vaccinations and to slow down or manage or whatever you want to say about to reduce the impact of the pandemic. So right. Knowing that they're going to do everything that they can within the legal framework, they're obviously testing what the boundaries of that legal framework are. So it would seem logical to me that something's going to happen. There's going to have to dial back the severity or that's maybe a politically charged word. They're going to have to dial back the strength of some of these mandates so that it fits within a legal context. Do I have that right? And is there anything else you'd want to kind of wrap?
I think compromise is a good word, because obviously if they're being challenged, the only way that it's going to get through is if they meet some of those challenges halfway, to try and make it a little bit more palatable for the states. And there's actually unions fighting it as well. There's some unions that are all for it, at some of our employers that we work with. The unions are the ones pushing it. And then there's unions that are against it. So it's, the one constant about the pandemic, Mike, and, how employers have to deal with it is that it's always in flux. Because honestly, the new variant in Africa, I think is going to throw a whole new challenge in there. And I don't know which way it's going to fall, but we are in a state of flux. And again, one of the reasons we wanted to get to provide some education and information to our employers is just because of that. And it's not necessarily a wait and see, that we should all be taking some action, whether you have 1 employee or 1,000 employees or somewhere in between. We all need to be taking some action right now to make our organizations as productive and compliant as possible.
Yeah, and I guess just for context for everybody, this is really interesting. This is why we made the decision. I'm going back one slide. This is why we made the decision to we got to working on this ebook, this guide right after September 9th. But we were waiting on the OSHA guidance to really complete it and publish it. And then with all the lawsuits, we're like, oh, we want to steer people right. It just seems clear now something's going to happen. There's uncertainty, but we will always guide people, guide businesses to err on the side of complying with the law and err on the side of employee safety. So we're going to come back to and reference the guidance in here a whole bunch. Just know that there's a bunch of uncertainty about timing and what specific elements, but I still think it's a valuable resource. So given all that backdrop, Mary, what is your advice for employers? What should they be doing? What should they not be doing?
So within the context allowed, and I caution employers again to make sure that this is kept confidential. And again, Assure Payroll clients can keep this for each employee through that HRIS system. And then there should be a master list of all employees and their vaccination status, whether they're fully vaccinated, partially vaccinated, or they have a religious or medical exemption from being vaccinated. So that's the first thing that employers can do. The other thing that they need to start thinking about is, if the mandate comes through, how are they going to comply with it? So are they either going to mandate the vaccine, or are they going to allow for the testing option? If they're going to mandate the vaccine, how does that look? What's going to happen? How much time are they giving people? What kind of proof are they looking for those people that get vaccinated, making sure that they're allowing for 4 hours for each shot if it's during work hours, and time off if they're ill after that vaccine, which they should be doing regardless of whether the mandate comes through. And then if they're going with the testing option, how is that going to look? Are they passing on the cost to the employees? Federally, right now, as the law stands, it does allow for the cost of that testing to be passed on to employees, but there are some states that do not allow that, like California. So you have to be careful, again, to look at those state laws, which is why we're going over them today, some of them. And then the other thing that employers should always be doing through this entire pandemic and uncertain time is communicating with employees. Even if that communication is, there's a mandate out there, it's stayed in the courts. Right now, our organization has not made a decision on how we will comply with it until we have, the final, regs come out. Whatever it is that you're communicating to your employees, it needs to be, first of all, compliant with local, state, and federal law. But secondly, it has to be in step with your culture, right? So communication is always a positive thing. Employees want to know information, again, particularly now, particularly because a lot of us have employees that are still working remotely, and that mandates that we communicate even more than we normally do. And for our part at Assure Consulting, we're asking our employers to send something out every 2 weeks to remind people about those, CDC recommendations of social distancing, washing our hands, using antibacterial gel, all of the things that, quite honestly, we should be doing all the time, but especially during a pandemic, to keep ourselves safe. So those 3 things are things that I think all employers should be doing now to get ready if this mandate comes to fruition. No matter how it comes to fruition, those are things we should work on. And additionally, they should be thinking about a policy. So the mandate did come with a policy template that can be edited for the employer. And we've gone ahead and helped our clients do that. And that way, again, it probably will just need a little tweaking if the mandate gets edited slightly, even a lot, but at least we've put that work in progress. We started thinking about it with our employers to get them ready. Even though I know that there'll be some time to trigger this, it's still good to start having that conversation with leadership and HR to get some of these decisions and policies, procedures in motion. So those are some of the things that employers should be doing right now.
Yeah, you know what, Mary, so all good advice. And speaking to the culture thing, I've seen it at Assure, I've seen it at our customers and talking to entrepreneurs outside of work. I just think the more you can share and the more you can communicate with employees, the better. In not just sharing what your policy is, but the broader context, right? It's not like we're guiding people to blame the government, give the government credit. There's just a reality that there are going to be business owners who will lean one way and employees who lean another way. And there's going to be conflict. There's going to be sometimes hard feelings. Some employees will think their employer is not doing enough to protect them. There are going to be other employees who think their employer is stomping on their civil liberties. And it's gonna happen no matter what you do. The very best thing I think you can do is just communicate. And I think your employees, when they understand that you're doing your best to A, follow the law, B, provide a safe work environment, and C, do so in an extremely difficult regulatory climate, meaning the law is just super unclear here, and you're just doing your best, they're going to give you some goodwill. But if you kind of come guns ablaze and here's the policy and don't provide the context of what the government regulations are, then you're kind of inviting unnecessary conflict. Anything you'd want to add on that before we move on, Mary?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that well said, Mike.
Okay, so we talked a lot about, and I would point people back to the webinar from a couple of weeks ago. Mary really did a good job unpacking. So between the ebook and the webinar from a couple of weeks ago, there's all the information I think you need to really understand what is in the mandate, how to implement it, implement the guidance from OSHA. But knowing that all this is still kind of open-ended for we don't know what's going to change in timing, there's a bunch of stuff we do know, right? So one of the challenges I think for employers in this climate is you have to follow the law, but sometimes laws don't agree with each other. Federal law doesn't agree with state law doesn't agree with local law. Before we kind of jump into some of the big use cases here around specific state laws that we think everybody needs to be aware of, what general guidance would you give around this, the differences and sometimes inherent conflict in state versus federal versus local regulations?
So in my opinion, I've been in human resources for 30 years or plus, and really the states and the local municipalities traditionally weren't jumping into employment laws the way that I've seen recently. It's kind of funny because in the past 2 years during the pandemic and maybe a little before it, the state and local laws are out trending federal laws. And so always at Assure HR Consulting, we are looking at those state and local laws. New York City can be completely different than Long Island. San Francisco law can be completely different than LA or San Diego. Washington state is the same way with some of the local municipalities. So it's not even the states that are different, it's actually the municipalities. So when we're doing employee handbooks or any kind of policy or procedure, we are always looking at local and state laws, but it's unprecedented, the differences around COVID compliance, vaccinations, unprecedented how the states and the local laws are jumping into this and, making their own statements. And, we hear a lot of it, on the news. Disney was one of the big ones. So I think, Florida state has been in the news a lot, flexing, their muscles. Disney tried to get with the mandate, even though it didn't come out yet. And then Florida was, Disney in Florida, the Florida governor said, no, we're going to fine employers if they mandate the vaccine. So Disney had to backtrack and change what they did. So it's affecting all employers. So, you know, the reason that we wanted to educate employers about a couple of these laws is because we want you to pay attention to it. Obviously, we're paying attention to it at Assure HR Consulting, but we want employers on the call to be aware of some of these things that are happening. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and you know, all the empathy in the world goes out for our clients and business owners, because there simply are no black and white answers. Many cases, right? Your local county health official might give you a black and white answer that conflicts with a state black and white answer that conflicts with a federal black and white answer. Our only guidance is just do your best to follow the law, and if you are erring on the side of employee safety, even if you end up being in violation of a law, it's a heck of a lot better than erring on the side on the opposite side of not employee safety. Highly, just can't imagine scenarios where you're going to be in too much trouble if you err on the side of safety. So with that, let's kind of unpack a few of these state by state issues that maybe they don't conflict, but they are still unique and nuanced in their treatments. So let's start up in New York.
So New York has taken a really aggressive stance in that they instituted the New York HEROES Act. So the New York HEROES Act mandates that you have a policy, and they've made it pretty easy, right? Because there's a template policy, just like Biden's mandate is doing. And it talks about airborne disease and what your organization is going to do in case there's an airborne disease, i.e. COVID. And it's really actually a very good policy to have. At the beginning of the pandemic, this is something that we suggested to all employers in any state. What are you doing to keep your employees safe? What are you doing when somebody gets sick? And I know that our employers have this, and I'm sure a lot do, have a policy and procedure. Somebody gets sick, we shut down for 24 hours, we bring that cleaning crew in to clean. And a lot of that is in that HEROES Act. This is an addendum that we have been doing for our New York employers, but it is mandated by New York State. So if you haven't called us yet to have us, you know, help you create this New York HEROES policy for your employees, for your organization, then please call us. And I will just add one thing to what you were just saying about, you know, this, you know, looking at all these laws, and that is you have to call a professional. So whether it's an employment attorney that you work with, or, you know, my team at Assure HR Consulting, you need a professional to get through the pandemic and to adhere to all these laws to help you, even if it's just to have us give you a little guidance. Hey, this is what's happening in your industry. That's one of the benefits that we provide to our employers. It's not a good idea. Googling is not a strategy when it comes to employment law. You have to talk to a professional.
Yeah, Mary, before we go to the next one, what guidance do you give our listeners around multi-state businesses? So an awful lot of businesses do operate, you know, near state lines, and they'll have employees from 2 or 3 or even 4 states coming into a work site. But how should employers think about work site versus home address of employees? I know that a lot of people come to us for the compliance challenges around taxation, but how should they be thinking about workplace safety, COVID regulations when it comes to multi-state employees?
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because the employment laws are catching up to the fact that a lot of employees now are remote. So even the Family Medical Leave Act, which of course is a federal law applying to employers with 50 or more employees, even FMLA came out and said, okay, for your remote employees, we're counting them in that 50 count based on not where they live and where they're working remotely, but the office that they report to. So, and that's how they're counting that 50 employee count. So, and each law is a little bit different. There is no hard line where you can say the law applies to the employee where they live. Each law is a little bit different. So again, for each, employment law, you have to look at the state, local, and federal mandates to see, how they're counting the employees, whether or not that employee, if they live in New York but report to Austin, Texas, which we certainly have that situation, do they have to do some of the New York laws apply to them? Some do and some don't, if you can believe it. So again, many of these laws have to be discussed with professionals, because Googling is not going to give you the answer. You're going to spend hours and hours Googling, and you're not going to get the right answer. And that's where, we help small businesses get through these mandates and be compliant.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to our next use case. So, two states that are, very progressive and sometimes out of sync with the rest of the country in federal law. You talked about increasingly, historically stayed out of employment law, and increasingly taking a bigger role. California and New York, two examples where that is happening. What can you tell us about first? What the heck is de minimis? And what is the relevancy for these two states?
So when an employer says that when we're looking at a exemption for religious or medical reasons, the standard says that if it's an undue hardship to the business can say that they're not going to they're not going to allow that employee to have that exemption due to that undue hardship. And that undue hardship is a little bit broad, right, based on the federal definition, but it usually is we can't conduct business. So it's the cost would be too high for us. A really common example would be the receptionist that greets all your clients, that has to be in the office to do so, to let people in the door, to open the mail, etc., wants to work from home. And it would be an undue hardship on the business, because then you wouldn't have anybody, that's part of the job responsibilities. But California and New York said, well, yeah, we're going to say that undue hardship has to go beyond de minimis, right? It has to be significant, right? So de minimis would be a minimal amount of undue hardship. But in California and New York, they're saying, no, we really want that standard to be a little bit higher. And we're asking employers to show that there is even a more significant undue hardship to the organization to not adhere to some of these exemptions. And we are seeing it in other states. So I just want everybody on the call to understand that we're highlighting some of these laws just to help you guys, just to let you know that this is the tip of the iceberg. This would take us days, if not weeks, to go through all of them. We're just highlighting some of them. But New York and California, this is definitely a standard. And what I've seen in my many years of experience is that a lot of times, California and New York will lead these employment laws and other states will adapt them pretty quickly, right? So you just don't know who's going to also adopt these, but you need to know that these are out there when you're going through, making your policies and procedures during COVID.
Yeah, you make a good point. So we'll probably fly through some of these next ones pretty quickly, because A, if you don't have employees working there, it doesn't apply. We want to make this relevant for everybody. But B, it really just underscores the importance of, this isn't just, oh, good news, the federal mandate was shut down the Sixth Circuit Court. I don't have to comply. There are layers of compliance that must be considered. So with that, let's kind of jump into the exemption status for places like Texas and Utah.
So they're requiring that require an exemption if the mandate conflicts with a personal belief, which is completely opposite of what was always stated. So when it came to that religious exemption, you had to somehow give some kind of proof, and it couldn't be because I'm against the vaccine. It had to be rooted in cultural or religious beliefs. Personal belief is completely different. So that definitely is different. And Texas as a whole prohibits mandates altogether. So that is in direct conflict with what the federal mandate may be.
So, Mary, I know we kind of talked about it in concept. Just let's use Texas as an example. If your governor says, if the president says, hey, here's a mandate, OSHA says, hey, here's the rules and how we're going to enforce that mandate, but then your governor says, yeah, you don't have to here. I mean, what the heck kind of guidance are we giving business owners in Texas or any other state who follow suit?
Well, you do the testing. You'd allow for testing in Texas.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear for everybody so that we don't get lost. This is the divisive decision here is whether you do or don't allow testing, meaning you allow people to not get vaccinated so long as they provide the testing, right? This is not whether binary, you're all in or all out on all elements of the mandate. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, just like we said at the beginning. And I want everybody to understand these state laws and local laws could change as well when the mandate comes out to try and adhere to the mandate. So everything's in flux, but we want you to be aware of some of these things that are effective right now.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's talk about nuance in Tennessee.
So Tennessee requires an exemption if the employee requests the exemption for any reason. So that's the broadest one that I've seen.
All right, now beyond just testing, do I have to take the vaccine? Is it mandated? Are there alternatives? Let's talk about unemployment benefits. There's other ramifications here.
Exactly. So, there's a lot of movement in the courts, right? As far as mandating the vaccine and then terminating people. But these 4 states have made it so that if you are terminated because you refuse to get vaccinated, you can get unemployment. You're eligible for unemployment. And I honestly would say that, look, unemployment mandates that an employee gets unemployment benefits if they lose their job through no fault of their own. So I would say that even in New York or Texas, if you went into your unemployment office and said, I was terminated because I refused to get the vaccination for XYZ reasons, I believe that some of those unemployment offices would also allow employees to get unemployment. So it's important that employers know about this as well.
Yeah. So again, the repeated answer here is check with local authorities, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So this last one isn't so much. It's mandate related, but it's not a state specific thing. We've been talking about OSHA in the kind of the governing body to put enforcement rules around the mandate, but here's something from the EEOC. Got a clipping here from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution talking about a lawsuit the EEOC filed on behalf of an employee in the impact of remote work. Can you put some color on this for us?
I can, and again, like you said, Mike, I'm glad for anybody that's on this call because we're educating you and trying to help you. This is a difficult time to be a business owner because you're trying to keep your employees safe, but then, how exactly do you do that? And now we're seeing, so the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So that's our federal governing body that oversees discrimination law. And a lawsuit that was recently filed there, the employee said, yeah, well, I think it's safer for me to work from home because I have a disability, because it's unsafe in the workplace because COVID is still such a danger. And it's yet to be seen how the courts are going to rule in this instance. And this isn't the only court case that's similar to that. We have also actually seen cases filed with the EEOC or local division of human rights that employees are now saying, bringing suit saying, okay, I got an exemption not to get vaccinated. Now I'm asking for an exemption not to test because that is also against my religious beliefs. So again, these court cases haven't been settled yet, so we don't know where the courts are going to land, but it is important for employers to understand what's going on in the courts, what lawsuits are being brought so that they can try to protect themselves from this type of litigation.
Yeah, very good. Well, certainly complex waters to wade through here. So we know there's a mandate. OSHA provided the rules in enforcement of said mandate. We know it's hung up in the courts. It seems unlikely that the mandate is going to stand as it is. Also seems unlikely that it's going to be completely struck down and nothing happens. So how would you close for people here, Mary? Just kind of recap for the entrepreneurs and businesses trying to grow.
I mean, I think I would keep us on speed dial. And I would make sure that you're looking to see, what our next webinar is, because you have to be educated on this. And this is not a wait and see situation. You need to take the actions that we recommended. You need to talk to a professional to make sure that your organization is compliant. And again, even for those employers less than 100 employees, you have local and state mandates that you need to be adhering to.
All right, I appreciate it, Mary. So with that, I will say, one slide here, tip my hat to Mary and her organization. This is just darn complex stuff to get through. And so if you need help, we do have 3 levels of support from Mary's organization that we can help clients. First is HR support for managers. So if you just simply need a go-to resource for your managers, pick up the phone, hop on the internet, have a specific HR question that they need an answer for, we can do that. If you need more strategic HR for your management team, certainly all the same capabilities around internet and phone support, but also something proactive around talent management, trying to proactively build a team and a culture. Or if this stuff is just too complex, in the thought about hiring certified HR professionals, it simply doesn't fit in the budget or isn't something you want to take on, then we have Total HR for all employees, where we literally can be that outsourced HR department that your managers can use as a resource, but also frontline employees can simply pick up the phone and call, and we will represent you as your HR department. So I will point everybody back to the Employer's Guide to the Federal COVID-19 Vaccine Mandates, where we answer all your questions about implementation, compliance testing, masks, and the legal issues. Really encourage you to consume this content and really understand it and communicate with your employees. We know there's a lot still in flux and things are going to change, but the core principles of the mandate, I think, are not going to change. And I think the lion's share of the OSHA rules are probably not going to change. And I think this ebook serves as a good starting point for you to build your policies and your communication plans with your employees. And with that, thanks everybody for their time. This is what Assure does. We try to help all of our clients stay compliant with very, very complex, ever-changing HR laws, and really help build teams and get the most from your people so that we can get back to growing our businesses once again as we think we see light at the end of the tunnel coming out of this pandemic. Mary, thanks for your time. Always enjoy our conversations.
Mm-hmm. That was just great. Thank you.
And thanks to everybody else for joining us. Until next time, thanks.